The soldier's name was Captain Dax Callan. He had seen more galaxies than he could count, fought in wars that spanned light years, and stared down death so many times it almost felt like an old friend. But nothing, not the plasma storms of Krylos, 7 or the acid jungles of Varnock Prime, could have prepared him for what happened on the dying battlefield of Zentrix 4. Dax knelt beside the alien queen as her towering frame slumped into his arms. She wasn't just any ruler. She was Queen Erilyn Vex, sovereign of the Terran Dominion, a sprawling empire of stars and civilizations. Her emerald skin shimmered faintly even now, though life was ebbing from her eyes. A jagged wound marred her chest, glowing faintly with traces of energy left by the assassin's blade. The air around them smelled of scorched metal and ozone, remnants of the battle that had raged moments before. "Marry my daughters," she whispered, her voice barely audible over the hum of distant explosions. Her golden eyes locked onto his, burning with urgency despite their fading glow. "Promise me." Before Dax could respond, her body went limp, her head lolling against his shoulder. For a moment, all he could do was stare at her, stunned. Marry her daughters? What kind of last request was that? And why him? He wasn't royalty, not even close. He was just a human soldier who'd been fighting to protect humanity's fragile foothold in this part of the galaxy. Yet here he was, cradling one of the most powerful beings in existence, and suddenly tasked with something utterly absurd. A sharp whistle cut through his thoughts. Lieutenant Jory Tanis jogged up behind him, his boots crunching on shards of crystalline debris. "Captain, we've got incoming," Tanis shouted, pointing toward the horizon where streaks of red light signaled reinforcements arriving too late to save their queen but early enough to make things complicated. Dax gently laid Erilyn's body down, brushing a stray strand of silvery hair from her face. This act alone would haunt him later. He didn't know how yet, but for now, survival took priority. He stood, grabbing his pulse rifle from the ground. "Fall back to the extraction point," he ordered Tanis. "We need to get out of here before they figure out we're still alive." As they sprinted across the shattered landscape, dodging bursts of enemy fire, Dax couldn't shake the weight of those final words. Marry her daughters. It sounded insane, impossible. But deep down, he knew it wasn't just some random plea. There was purpose behind it. Purpose he couldn't ignore. Back aboard the Eclipse, Dax's ship and temporary command center, chaos reigned. Holographic maps flickered above consoles, showing the encroaching forces surrounding Zentrix 4. Engineers scrambled to repair damaged systems, while medics tended to wounded crew members sprawled across makeshift cots. Amidst the din, Dax found himself standing in the captain's quarters, staring at the small data crystal clutched in his hand. It had been tucked into Erilyn's robes when he'd carried her away, its presence both a clue and a burden. "What's that?" asked Ensign Lyra Phoenix, leaning casually against the doorway. She was young, barely out of training, but sharp as a razor when it came to tech. Her dark curls framed a face full of curiosity, though her tone held a hint of skepticism. "Something the Queen gave me," Dax replied cryptically, turning the crystal over in his fingers. "Or rather, something I found on her." Lyra raised an eyebrow. "You mean the same Queen you were cuddling with when we pulled your sorry butt off that rock?" Dax shot her a glare. "I wasn't cuddling. She died in my arms." "Oh right, because that makes it so much better," Lyra quipped, rolling her eyes. Still, she stepped closer, peering at the crystal. "Well, whatever it is, it's probably important. Want me to crack it open?" He hesitated. Something about this felt private. Like opening it without knowing exactly what it contained might unleash consequences he wasn't ready for. But then again, staying ignorant wasn't going to help either. With a sigh, he handed it over. "Do your thing." Lyra grinned, already pulling tools from her belt. Within minutes, she had connected the crystal to a portable reader, and lines of alien text began scrolling across the screen. As she translated, her expression shifted from amusement to confusion to outright disbelief. "Well," Dax prompted, growing impatient. "What does it say?" "It says—" Lyra paused, clearly struggling to process. "It says you're engaged." Dax blinked. "Engaged? To who?" "To 3 people," she clarified, tapping furiously at the screen. Princess Nissa, Princess Serial, and Princess Kalira. Apparently, they're her daughters. And according to this, you're supposed to marry them all. For a long moment, there was silence. Then Dax burst out laughing. That has to be a joke. Even if it weren't completely ridiculous, why would I agree to something like that? Lyra shrugged. Maybe because refusing means starting a galactic war? Look, this document isn't just a love letter. It's a legal decree. By accepting the crystal, you've technically agreed to uphold the terms set forth by the Queen. If you back out, the Terran Dominion will see it as an act of betrayal. And trust me, these guys don't mess around. Dax groaned, sinking into a chair. Of course it wouldn't be simple. Nothing ever was. So let me get this straight, he said slowly. I'm expected to waltz into their palace, charm 3 princesses, who are probably terrifying, and somehow convince them to marry me? All while keeping half the galaxy from blowing us to bits. Pretty much, Lyra confirmed cheerfully. But hey, at least you'll have interesting stories to tell your grandkids. Days turned into weeks as preparations were made. Diplomatic channels buzzed with activity, relaying messages between the Eclipse and the Terran homeworld, Irinder. From what little intel Dax gathered, the princesses were as different as night and day. Nissa, the eldest, was a strategist known for her cold efficiency. Serial, the middle child, was a free spirit with a penchant for art and rebellion. Kalira, the youngest, was rumored to be shy and reserved, rarely seen outside the royal palace. When the time came to meet them, Dax found himself standing awkwardly in the grand hall of Irinder's capital city, surrounded by opulent architecture that seemed designed to intimidate. Towering spires reached toward the sky, their surfaces etched with intricate carvings that pulsed faintly with bioluminescent light. Guards lined the walls, their weapons gleaming ominously in the dim glow. And then they entered, Nissa first, her regal posture radiating authority. Her silver armor caught the light, each plate engraved with symbols of power. Behind her trailed Serial, clad in flowing robes adorned with splashes of color that seemed to shift as she moved. Lastly came Kalira, her delicate features partially obscured by a translucent veil. Despite their differences, all 3 shared their mother's piercing gaze. Captain Dax Callan, Nissa began, her voice clipped and formal. You stand before us under unusual circumstances. Explain yourself. Taking a deep breath, Dax launched into his explanation. He spoke of the Queen's final moments, of the promise he'd made, and of the crystal that bound him to their family. As he talked, he watched their reactions carefully. Nissa remained stoic, though her jaw tightened slightly. Serial smirked, clearly amused by the absurdity of the situation. Kalira, however, looked uncertain, her hands twisting nervously in front of her. When he finished, silence hung heavy in the air. Finally, Serial broke it with a laugh. So, Mother thought marrying us off to a human soldier would solve everything? Classic Erilyn. Always thinking 10 steps ahead. Nissa shot her sister a warning glance. This is no laughing matter. The stability of our empire depends on alliances, not whimsical gestures. And yet here we are, Serial countered, crossing her arms. Unless you plan to defy her wishes, which I highly doubt. Kalira finally spoke, her voice soft but steady. Perhaps we should consider what she intended. Mother always had reasons for her actions, even if they weren't immediately clear. Nissa sighed, pinching the bridge of her nose. Very well. We will honor her request, for now. But understand this, Captain. If you fail to prove yourself worthy, there will be consequences. Dax nodded, trying to mask his unease. Worthy of what, exactly? Winning their affection? Proving his leadership skills? Surviving whatever challenges lay ahead? Whatever it was, he knew one thing for certain. This was only the beginning. Life in the palace was anything but easy. Between navigating political intrigues, avoiding assassination attempts, yes, plural, and attempting to bond with 3 very different women, Dax often wondered how he'd ended up in such a bizarre situation. Each princess presented her own unique challenge. Nissa tested him daily, assigning tasks that pushed his strategic mind to its limits. Whether it was devising battle plans or negotiating trade agreements, she demanded perfection, and wasn't shy about letting him know when he fell short. Yet beneath her stern exterior, Dax glimpsed flashes of vulnerability. Late one evening, after a particularly grueling session, she admitted, "I never wanted this throne. I wanted freedom, adventure. But duty calls, doesn't it?" Serial, on the other hand, delighted in throwing curveballs his way. One day, she dragged him to a bustling marketplace, insisting he try exotic foods and haggle with vendors. Another time, she challenged him to a high-speed race through the planet's floating gardens, leaving him breathless and bruised but oddly exhilarated. Through her antics, he learned to appreciate the beauty of spontaneity and the value of laughter. Kalira proved the most enigmatic of the trio. She spent hours painting murals in secluded courtyards, her creations vivid and hauntingly beautiful. When Dax approached her about joining her artistic endeavors, she hesitated but eventually agreed. Together, they worked on a mural depicting their intertwined fates, blending human and Terran imagery in ways neither had anticipated. In those quiet moments, Dax felt a connection forming, fragile but real. Despite their progress, tensions simmered beneath the surface. Not everyone in the court approved of a human taking charge, and whispers of rebellion grew louder with each passing day. Dax knew he couldn't rely solely on charm and goodwill to secure his place. He needed allies, and fast. One evening, as he reviewed reports in his chambers, Lyra burst in, breathless and wide-eyed. "Captain, you're not going to believe this. There's a fleet amassing near the edge of our territory. They're flying banners marked with the sigil of House Vaynar." House Vaynar, rivals of the Terran Dominion for centuries, infamous for their ruthlessness. If they attacked, it wouldn't just be Dax's future at stake, it would be the entire galaxy's balance of power. Without hesitation, Dax grabbed his communicator. "Send word to the princesses. We're going to war." The announcement sent shockwaves through the palace. Servants scurried like startled insects, extinguishing ceremonial flames and sealing ornate windows with reinforced shields. The air buzzed with urgency as guards armed themselves and diplomats scrambled to send last-minute pleas for reinforcements. Dax stood at the center of it all, feeling the weight of leadership settle heavily on his shoulders. He wasn't just a soldier anymore, he was a symbol, a human thrust into the heart of an alien empire's survival. Nissa appeared first, her armor gleaming under the dim emergency lights. "You've made your decision," she said, her tone clipped but not unkind. "Now tell me, what is your plan?" Dex took a deep breath. "We can't face House Vaynar head-on. Their numbers are too great, and their technology rivals ours. But we have something they don't, an unexpected wild card." Serial sauntered in next, twirling a dagger between her fingers. "Oh, this should be good. What's the big secret weapon?" "Your charming smile." Ignoring her jab, Dax continued. "House Vaynar thrives on predictability. They expect us to defend our borders or retreat behind them. Instead, we strike where they least expect it, their supply lines. Without resources, their fleet will falter." Kalira entered quietly, clutching a datapad filled with star charts. Her soft voice carried surprising authority. "I've marked potential weak points along their routes. If we deploy fast enough, we could cripple their operations before they even reach Arinder." For once, Nissa looked impressed. A bold strategy. Risky, but effective if executed correctly. She turned to Serial. "Coordinate with the engineering corps. We'll need every available ship retrofitted for speed and stealth." Serial grinned wickedly. "Finally, some fun. I'll make sure they're ready to dance circles around Vaynar's lumbering dreadnoughts." Dax nodded, grateful for their support. "Kalira, you'll stay here and monitor communications. Your insights will be crucial for coordinating our movements." Kalira hesitated, then met his gaze. "Are you certain?" "I want to help, not just watch from the sidelines." "I need someone I trust completely holding down the fort," Dax replied firmly. "That's you." As the sisters dispersed to carry out their tasks, Dax allowed himself a moment of quiet reflection. For all their differences, they were united by one thing: love for their mother and loyalty to her vision. And now, Somehow, that included him. The battle began under the cover of darkness, or what passed for darkness in space. Dax led a small squadron of cloaked vessels toward the asteroid belt where House Vaynar's supply ships lurked. The tension aboard his flagship, the Wraith, was palpable. Crew members whispered prayers to deities both human and alien, while others clutched talismans for luck. Approaching target zone, called Lieutenant Tanis from the helm. His knuckles were white against the controls, but his voice remained steady. Enemy sensors still haven't detected us. Good, Dax murmured, studying the tactical display. Engage cloak disruptors on my mark. Suddenly, alarms blared. A massive Vaynar cruiser emerged from hyperspace directly ahead, its cannons charging ominously. They knew we were coming, someone shouted. No time for panic, Dax barked. Everyone hold position until I give the signal. Seconds stretched into eternities as the enemy ship loomed closer. Just when it seemed inevitable that they'd be spotted, Dax slammed his fist onto the console. Now! The cloaking fields dropped simultaneously, revealing a swarm of Terran fighters hidden among the asteroids. Before the Vaynar cruiser could react, missiles streaked across the void, striking its engines and disabling its weapon systems. Cheers erupted throughout the Wraith's bridge, but Dax silenced them with a raised hand. This isn't over yet, he warned. We've only bought ourselves time. Meanwhile, back on Arinder, Kalira worked tirelessly to maintain contact with the fleet. Her delicate hands flew over the holographic interface, rerouting power to critical systems and patching through vital updates. Sweat beaded on her forehead, but she refused to rest. This was her chance to prove herself, to show that she was more than just the quiet daughter who hid behind her veil. When a second wave of Vaynar forces appeared unexpectedly near the outer rim, Kalira acted without hesitation. Using decoy signals, she lured several squadrons into a trap set by Serial's agile fighters. The ambush decimated the invaders, turning the tide of the skirmish in their favor. Back on the front lines, Serial reveled in the chaos. Piloting her sleek interceptor, she darted between enemy vessels, leaving trails of destruction in her wake. Her laughter echoed over the comms channel, infectious and defiant. "Is that all you've got?" she taunted, spinning her craft into a daring barrel roll. "Come on, Vaynar. Give us a real challenge." Even Nissa found herself smiling faintly as she oversaw the operation from her command vessel. Though she rarely showed emotion, she couldn't deny the thrill of seeing her sisters rise to the occasion, and Dax leading them with unwavering determination. But the war was far from won. As the initial victories mounted, so did the cost. Casualties piled up, and supplies dwindled. Worse still, rumors spread that House Vaynar had forged alliances with other factions eager to see the Terran Dominion fall. It became clear that brute force alone wouldn't end the conflict. In the midst of the turmoil, Dax received an encrypted message from an unknown sender. Decoding it revealed a single line: "Meet me at the Obsidian Spire. Alone." The Obsidian Spire was a remote outpost located on a desolate moon orbiting a dying star. Few ventured there willingly. It was a place of shadows and secrets, rumored to be haunted by the spirits of fallen warriors. Yet Dax knew he had no choice but to investigate. Whoever had sent the message clearly possessed information critical to their survival. Disguising his approach with a stolen Vaynar insignia, Dax landed his shuttle at the base of the spire. The structure loomed above him, jagged and foreboding, its surface pockmarked with age. As he ascended the narrow staircase carved into the rock, his pulse quickened. Every step felt like walking deeper into a trap. At the summit, he found a lone figure waiting, a woman cloaked in black, her face obscured by a hood. When she spoke, her voice was low and measured. "Captain Callan, you're braver than I expected." "Who are you?" Dax demanded, his hand hovering near his weapon. She lowered her hood, revealing sharp features and piercing violet eyes. "My name is irrelevant. What matters is why I summoned you. House Vaynar plans to unleash a superweapon capable of obliterating entire planets. If they succeed, Arinder will be their first target." Dax's blood ran cold. "How do I stop it?" "You must infiltrate their flagship during the next engagement," she explained. "The weapon's core is unstable, If destroyed, it will trigger a chain reaction that consumes the ship. And you're telling me this because... Because I owe Erilyn a debt, the woman admitted, her expression softening briefly. And because I believe you're the only one who can pull it off. As she vanished into the shadows, Dax realized the enormity of what lay ahead. Not only would he have to lead his forces in battle, but he'd also have to risk everything to sabotage the enemy's ultimate weapon. Failure meant annihilation, for the Terran Dominion, for humanity, and for any hope of peace in the galaxy. Returning to Arinder, Dax gathered the princesses in the war room. The holographic map flickered above the table, displaying the projected trajectory of the Vaynar flagship. "This is it," he said grimly. "Our final stand." Nyssa studied the map intently. "If we concentrate our forces here," she pointed to a choke point near a nebula, "we can funnel them into a kill zone." Sariel smirked. "And while they're distracted, you'll sneak aboard their ship like the sneaky little human you are." "It's not going to be easy," Dax warned. "Their security is impenetrable." Kalira stepped forward, holding up a small device. "Then take this. It's a neural interface I've been working on. It'll allow you to bypass their systems undetected." Dax stared at her, astonished. "You built this?" She nodded shyly. "I wanted to contribute, to protect everyone, and to honor Mother." For the first time since arriving on Arinder, Dax felt a glimmer of hope. These women weren't just heirs to a throne, they were warriors, innovators, and survivors. Together, they might actually stand a chance. As the fleet prepared for the climactic battle, Dax allowed himself a rare moment of vulnerability. Standing on the balcony overlooking the city, he watched the twin suns dip below the horizon, painting the sky in hues of gold and crimson. Behind him, the princesses joined him silently, each lost in their own thoughts. "What happens after this?" Kalira asked softly. "If we win, what then?" Dax glanced at her, then at Nyssa and Sariel. "We rebuild. We find a way to unite, not just the Terran Dominion, but all the fractured pieces of this galaxy. And maybe, just maybe, we start something new." Sariel chuckled. "Sounds ambitious. I like it." Nyssa crossed her arms, though a faint smile played at her lips. "One step at a time, Captain. First, we survive." With renewed resolve, they turned back toward the palace, ready to face whatever came next. The galaxy awaited, vast and uncertain, but for the first time, Dax didn't feel afraid. The battle began with a deafening roar, as if the void itself had been torn apart. Ships clashed in a dazzling display of light and fire, their weapons painting streaks of destruction across the stars. Dax stood on the bridge of the Wraith, his eyes glued to the tactical screen as Nyssa's strategy unfolded before him. The Terran fleet executed a flawless pincer movement, herding House Vaynar's forces into the nebula choke point exactly as planned. "Enemy ships are entering the kill zone," Lieutenant Tanis reported, his voice tense but controlled. "All units, prepare for maximum engagement." Dax nodded, gripping the railing tightly. "Signal Nyssa's flagship to initiate Phase 2. On cue, Nyssa's command vessel unleashed a barrage of EMP torpedoes, disabling several Vaynar cruisers and creating chaos within their ranks. Meanwhile, Sariel's agile fighters darted through the fray, picking off stragglers and sowing confusion among the enemy pilots. Their maneuvers were reckless yet precise, a testament to Sariel's unorthodox brilliance. But even as the tide seemed to turn in their favor, Dax couldn't shake the gnawing sense of unease in his gut. This was only the prelude. The real danger lay aboard the Vaynar flagship, where the superweapon loomed like a ticking time bomb. He glanced at Kalira's neural interface device, secured firmly to his wrist. Its faint hum was a constant reminder of what he had to do. "Captain," Tanis said suddenly, pointing to a blip on the radar. "That's it, their flagship is moving into position." Dax exhaled sharply. Time to go. Boarding the Vaynar flagship felt like stepping into the belly of a beast. The corridors were dimly lit, lined with pulsating conduits that gave off an eerie glow. Every sound echoed ominously, from the clank of Dax's boots to the distant hum of machinery. He moved cautiously, relying on Kalira's device to mask his presence from the ship's security systems. The first wave of guards came swiftly, rounding a corner just as he reached a critical junction. Dax ducked behind a bulkhead, activating the neural interface. A holographic overlay appeared before his eyes, highlighting weak points in the guard's armor and suggesting optimal attack vectors. In one fluid motion, he disarmed the nearest soldier and used his weapon to incapacitate the others. They crumpled silently to the floor, leaving him clear to proceed. As he navigated deeper into the ship, the tension mounted. Each step brought him closer to the heart of the superweapon, and the inevitable confrontation waiting for him there. He couldn't help but wonder who would be guarding such a catastrophic device. Was it another general, cold and calculating? Or perhaps someone more personal, someone tied to the legacy of Queen Erilyn? Finally, he reached the chamber housing the weapon's core. It was larger than he'd imagined, a towering structure of crystalline alloys that pulsed with unstable energy. The air crackled with static electricity, making the hairs on his neck stand on end. Standing beside the console was a figure cloaked in crimson, their back turned to him. "You're late," the figure said calmly, turning to reveal none other than the mysterious woman from the obsidian spire. Dax froze, his pulse hammering in his ears. "You? Why are you here?" She smirked, though her violet eyes betrayed a flicker of sadness. "To ensure this weapon never sees the light of day, and to see if you're truly worthy of my trust." Before he could respond, alarms blared throughout the chamber. Reinforcements were incoming, their heavy footsteps thundering down the corridor. Dax cursed under his breath. "We don't have much time." "Then let's make it count," she replied, tossing him a detonator. "Plant this on the core and get out. I'll hold them off." "No," Dax shot back, shaking his head. "I'm not leaving you behind." Her expression softened, almost imperceptibly. "You don't have a choice. Someone has to buy you time, and I've already lived longer than I deserved." For a moment, they locked gazes, unspoken words passing between them. Then, without another word, she drew her blade and stepped toward the doorway, positioning herself to face the approaching horde. Dax hesitated, torn between gratitude and guilt. But the countdown timer on the detonator reminded him there was no room for hesitation. With a final glance at the woman, he sprinted toward the core, planting the device at its base. The mechanism beeped ominously as it armed itself, signaling the beginning of the end. As he retraced his steps toward the escape pod bay, explosions rocked the ship, sending shockwaves rippling through the corridors. Smoke filled the air, stinging his lungs and obscuring his vision. Just as he reached the pods, a massive blast knocked him off his feet, slamming him against the wall. Pain flared along his ribs, but he forced himself to keep moving. He launched the pod seconds before the superweapon detonated, engulfing the flagship in a blinding explosion. Debris rained down around him as he hurtled through space, the screams of dying enemies fading into silence. For a brief moment, all he could hear was his own ragged breathing. Back aboard the Wraith, the crew erupted into cheers as the Vaynar flagship disintegrated before their eyes. The remaining enemy ships scattered, leaderless and demoralized. Victory was theirs, but it came at a cost. Nissa, Serial, and Kalira greeted Dax as he staggered onto the bridge, battered but alive. "You did it," Nissa said simply, her golden eyes gleaming with pride. Serial grinned, slapping him on the back. "Told you we could pull it off. Though next time, try not to look so heroic while nearly getting yourself killed." Kalira handed him a medkit, her hands trembling slightly. "Thank you," she whispered, her voice thick with emotion. "For everything." Dax managed a weary smile. "Couldn't have done it without all of you." But as the celebrations continued, his thoughts drifted back to the woman in the crimson cloak. Her sacrifice weighed heavily on him, a stark reminder of the price of freedom. She had given him more than intel, she had given him hope, and now she was gone. In the weeks that followed, the galaxy began to heal. House Vaynar's defeat marked the end of an era, paving the way for peace talks between warring factions. Under Dax's guidance, the Terran Dominion opened its borders, fostering alliances once thought impossible. The princesses embraced their roles as leaders, each bringing unique strengths to the table. Nissa spearheaded diplomatic efforts, forging treaties that stabilized entire sectors. Serial became a cultural ambassador, using art and music to bridge divides between species. Kalira focused on innovation, developing technologies that improved life across the empire. Together, they formed a council unlike any the galaxy had ever seen, one built on unity rather than conquest. As for Dax, he found himself caught between two worlds. He was no longer just a human soldier or a reluctant suitor. He was a symbol of possibility, proof that even the most unlikely bonds could change the course of history. Yet despite his newfound status, he remained grounded, always remembering the lessons he'd learned on Erinder. One evening, as he stood on the palace balcony overlooking the city, he felt a gentle hand slip into his. Turning, he saw Kalira smiling up at him, her veil long since discarded. "What happens now?" she asked softly. Dax gazed out at the stars, twinkling like diamonds against the velvet sky. "Now, we build something lasting. Something worth fighting for." And for the first time in what felt like forever, he believed it. Months passed, and the Terran Dominion transformed into a beacon of progress and unity. The scars of war still lingered, craters marred distant moons, and memorial walls bore the names of those lost, but hope had taken root in their place. Under the shared leadership of Dax and the princesses, Erinder flourished as a hub of diplomacy, innovation, and culture. It wasn't perfect. Disagreements arose, old rivalries simmered beneath the surface, and there were days when compromise felt impossible. But through it all, they stood together, bound not just by duty but by something deeper, trust. Dax found himself growing more comfortable in his role, though he often joked that he'd traded one battlefield for another. "At least no one's shooting at me during council meetings," he quipped to Serial one afternoon as they reviewed plans for a new arts festival. She laughed, leaning back in her chair. "Give it time. I'm sure someone will throw a drink at you eventually." Nissa entered the room then, carrying a stack of data pads. Her stern expression softened slightly at the sight of them laughing. "If you two are done wasting resources on frivolous banter, we have actual work to do." "Oh, lighten up, Nissa," Serial teased, tossing a cushion at her sister. "Even queens need hobbies." To everyone's surprise, Nissa caught the cushion and placed it neatly beside her before sitting down. "Fine. But only because this festival might improve morale across the Empire." She glanced at Dax. "Though if any of your human customs involve public humiliation, I reserve the right to veto them." The comment earned a round of laughter, easing the tension that sometimes crept into their discussions. Over time, these moments of levity became commonplace, helping to strengthen the bonds between them. They weren't just allies anymore, they were family. Kalira, meanwhile, continued to blossom in ways none of them had anticipated. Her murals now adorned the palace walls, telling stories of resilience, love, and unity. One particularly striking piece depicted Queen Erelyn surrounded by constellations, her arms outstretched as if embracing the galaxy. Beneath her were portraits of Dax and the three princesses, their faces painted with such care and detail that it brought tears to anyone who saw it. One evening, as Dax wandered through the courtyard where Kalira worked, he paused to admire the mural. "It's beautiful," he said softly, startling her. She turned, brushing paint-streaked hands against her apron. "Thank you. I wanted to honor Mother, and everything she believed in." He stepped closer, studying the way she'd captured each of their expressions. "You've got talent, Kalira. This isn't just art, it's a legacy." Her cheeks flushed, but she met his gaze steadily. "I think we're all building legacies, in our own way. You included." For a moment, they simply looked at each other, the weight of unspoken feelings hanging in the air. Then, without thinking, Dax reached out and tucked a strand of hair behind her ear. "You know," he said, his voice low, "your mother was right about one thing. Bringing us together was the best decision she ever made." Kalira smiled, her eyes shining. Maybe she knew what she was doing after all. As the seasons changed, so too did the dynamics within the royal household. Slowly but surely, Dax began to navigate the complexities of his relationships with the princesses. Each of them brought something unique to his life, challenging him, supporting him, and teaching him lessons he never expected to learn. With Nissa, he discovered the value of discipline and foresight. Their debates over strategy often stretched late into the night, but they always ended with mutual respect, and occasionally, a shared cup of tea. With Serial, he learned to embrace spontaneity and joy, whether it was racing through floating gardens or dancing under alien skies. And with Kalira, he found solace and understanding, her quiet strength reminding him that even in chaos, beauty could be found. But the question of marriage lingered, unresolved. Though the legal decree remained valid, none of them rushed to fulfill it. Instead, they chose to focus on healing their fractured empire and nurturing the fragile peace they'd fought so hard to achieve. Then came the day of the Unity Gala, an event designed to celebrate the newfound harmony among the stars. Representatives from across the galaxy gathered in Arinder's Grand Hall, their laughter and music filling the air. Dax stood on the balcony overlooking the festivities, feeling a sense of pride he hadn't known was possible. "You look like you're carrying the weight of the universe again," Serial remarked, joining him with a glass of sparkling liquid in hand. "Just thinking," Dax replied, accepting the drink. "About how far we've come." "And how much farther we have to go," Nissa added, appearing beside them. She wore ceremonial robes adorned with intricate embroidery, a stark contrast to her usual armor. Yet even dressed in finery, she exuded authority. Kalira joined them last, holding a small box wrapped in silk. "Mother used to say that every journey begins with a single step," she said, offering the box to Dax. "This is yours." Curious, Dax opened it to reveal 3 rings, each crafted from different materials. Silver for Nissa, gold for Serial, and crystal for Kalira. Engraved on each was a phrase in the ancient language of the Terran people: "Together we rise." "It's not a demand," Nissa clarified, though her tone was unusually gentle. "It's a choice. If you're willing to share this path with us, to truly become part of our family, we'll stand by you, no matter what." Serial grinned mischievously. "And don't worry, Captain. We promise not to make you wear all 3 at once. That'd be ridiculous." Dax chuckled, overwhelmed by the gesture. Looking at each of them, their courage, their compassion, their unwavering belief in a better future, he realized he already had his answer. Kneeling before them, he took the rings in his hands. "I choose you. All of you. Not because I have to, but because I want to." Tears glistened in Kalira's eyes as she knelt beside him, followed by Nissa and Serial. Together, they exchanged vows, not just of love, but of partnership, of commitment to a cause greater than themselves. The ceremony was simple yet profound, witnessed only by the stars above and the bond they shared. Years later, when historians wrote of the Terran Dominion's golden age, they spoke not of conquests or battles, but of unity. Of a human soldier who defied odds to bring peace to a fractured galaxy. Of 3 princesses who embraced change and forged a brighter future. And of a queen whose final words had sparked a revolution. On a quiet evening, long after the cheers of victory had faded, Dax sat with his wives beneath the same balcony where their journey had begun. The city below sparkled like a sea of stars, its light reflecting in their eyes. "So," Serial said, breaking the comfortable silence, "what's next for us?" Dax smiled, leaning back in his chair. "Whatever comes our way. Together." And as they laughed, the galaxy stretched endlessly before them, a tapestry of possibilities waiting to unfold.